The Atlantic Council Global Energy Forum is a platform, as we've heard today, to set the global energy agenda of the year ahead. And I think for this next panel conversation, we want to build on our signature product in terms of the global energy agenda framing document. When we pulse the global energy and climate community, the broader energy community, to identify and kind of understand both retrospectively what the year behind us has meant and accomplished, and how we really translate that momentum into 2023 and beyond. I think particularly in the context of His Excellency Dr. Sultan's participation this morning in providing remarks and his role as COP28 President-designate. I think we have momentum not just for 2023, but we're also going into the 2030 goals of net zero and mid-century as well. So as we break down this conversation and what you've heard today, the global energy agenda really set the pace on three principal aspects of this past year and the year going forward in terms of the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the geopolitical aspects of that event and occurring event and challenges that poses for the global energy system. It is an aspect of recognizing as a resurgence of global energy security is at the forefront of the global energy agenda. How do we balance the market stability to provide for a platform for a rapid transition going forward? And of course, in the context of, again, COP28 this year in the UAE, how do we maintain momentum to have a road to net zero? That's the framing that you'll find in the global energy agenda this year. And to break this down, we're very, very fortunate to be joined by a distinguished group of panelists, beginning with Her Excellency Minister Belinda Balluku, who's Minister of Infrastructure and Energy and Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania, Stephen Kobos, President and Chief Executive Officer of Excelerate Energy, Roger Martella, Chief Sustainability Officer at GE, and Neeraj Agrawal, the Chief Financial Officer of Crescent Petroleum, and also the Board Director and CFO of the Crescent Group. Well, welcome. As I alluded to in the framing here this morning, we really kicked off the conversation, the global energy agenda, with a little bit of a retrospective and realizing how powerful the consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been on the global energy system and how transformative. And so, Minister Balluku, I think we're very fortunate to have you here because you're realizing this in real time from your experience in Europe. And we'd love to hear from your perspective how the energy landscape has really been transformed by 2022 and set that baseline for where we're going forward.
Thank you very much for having me here. Albania is part of European continent, but to the other side, we are still a candidate member to the European Union. But what the crisis have done during 2022, for sure, have bring all the European countries together to find a solution in this very challenging and difficult moment for all of us. So, common strategies, common intervention in short term, for sure, to resolve this problem have been done from all the European countries. And what was more important, we have designed now a strategy, a mid-term strategy, how to mitigate this crisis. And what is more important, our position of every country, of every government, is to protect our citizens and to protect the economy through protection to the business field. Of course, during the 2022, we have faced a very complex situation. Just to mention that before the energy crisis, before the Russian aggression to Ukraine, the energy in Europe used to be traded from 30 to 50 euro per megawatt. And during 2022, we have faced prices of import from 300, 400 euro, and even 1,044 in the last day of August. I'm referring to the Hungarian power exchange, which is used in the Balkan region. So the situation has been very difficult, but what we have seen is the solidarity and the common effort to protect our countries, to create the possibility of energy security, which is very important in nowadays, because it's not only the difficulty of the high prices. What was very challenging during 2022 was the supply. So the difficulty to have the necessary supply for each country regarding the gas and regarding the electricity. But it's crucial to say that Europe is standing to the green agenda, because we have understand that the diversification of sources is one of the key solutions. And the other one, of course, is saving energy. And Albania, as a country that is producing right now only renewable energy, we are producing 100% renewable energy in Albania. We are a case study in all the Europe. But to the other hand, we are in the hand of the mood of weather, because more than 99% of the energy is coming from hydro plants. We have started from 2019 to diversify our sources and to invest on PV parks and aeolic parks. But, of course, a reliable source of energy coming from LNG, it's very necessary to the country. So, with the help of US Energy Department, from 2020 we have started a local project in that time, which was connected with building an FSRU in the south of Albania, and a pipeline that will connect this floating port with the exit point of TAP in the Fier area. But seeing all the situation and due to this very harsh experience during 2022, this project that we have started with Excelerate Power actually have become a regional project. A project that can offer in the future energy supply, not only for Albania, but for Montenegro, for Kosovo, for North Macedonia, and other countries in the Western Balkans. A very important point that I would like to mention is that we started project together with Accelerate Power and Exxon Mobil. But during this very difficult year, many other partners have been very interesting to be part of the project, as Overgas, that they have declared that they want to book quantities of energy, of LNG, US LNG. And to the other hand, one of our most reputable partners that we have started good collaboration is the Spanish Enagas. So through the challenges, through the difficulties, Europe have experienced a new solidarity movement. How to face this very difficult moment, how to replace the necessity of Russian gas with other sources, and how to become a shield for our citizens. So I will close all this big picture here, because I'm pretty sure that we will have the possibility to discuss and to dialogue about our experiences during this challenging year.
Well, Minister, I think that's the framing we were looking for, and I really am captivated by the aspect of the strategic importance of the economy. Stephen, you know, as a CEO of a company that develops and operates flexible energy infrastructure solutions around the world, you're at the front lines of this conversation in a different way. You know, I'm looking at your operations as you build out in Finland and Germany and elsewhere around the world. Can you provide kind of the industry lens, I should say, to what you've seen occur in this past year and how that's impacting our path forward?
Sure. Thanks, Landon, and Thanks for gathering us here today. It's a real pleasure. It's been a very interesting year. It's called upon people to move quickly. You mentioned Finland. We signed that agreement with Gas Grid Finland in May of this year, and then roughly 200 days later, our FSRU, the Exemplar, showed up in the port of Inku, west of Helsinki, and is currently delivering natural gas downstream into Finland. It's almost a miracle when you think about it. We have 20% of the world's FSRU fleet, and the way that that asset class has allowed Europe to respond in this unprecedented speed in opening up new import facilities, it's just something that I think few people understood could happen. But that miracle has been repeated in Germany, Netherlands, Finland, and I think it's going to make a real difference. The reality is, we're not going to see the same sort of bottlenecks we saw in Europe in 2022 and in this year. You know, we're not going to see vessels queuing up because they can't get a slot. So there is going to be more LNG making its way, providing more energy security for Europe. So it's taken a lot of hard work. The Deputy Prime Minister speaks of that European solidarity, and you definitely see it with all the effort that's being put into responding quickly and ensuring energy security and alternatives through Europe. And we're just glad to be part of that with this flexible LNG import infrastructure.
Neeraj, I think bringing in a regional lens and, well, frankly, a global lens from Crescent Petroleum's perspective on this as well. You know, we've had some opportunities to discuss the energy trilemma and how the energy transition's evolving, both as a council but personally as well. You know, what's the past year taught us about the pace of the transition, and how do we move quickly while accounting for affordability, sustainability, and security?
Well, firstly, welcome, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So those three elements are the fundamental building blocks of sustainability, affordability, and the answer is very different where you come from. I think what 2022 has shown to us, a year of pain, but more importantly, the solutions for developing markets are very, very different compared to the solutions for developed markets. You look at the developing markets, and some of it was discussed in the earlier sessions today. 1 billion people with no access to power, 2 billion people using very primitive forms of cooking. You have nearly 1 billion people consuming less power than Spain with a population of 48 million people. So the solutions necessarily will have to be different for Africa, Asia, compared to what it would have to be for others. For us as Crescent, we have been successful in addressing those three elements. In Kurdistan region of Iraq, where our operations are, we've been producing there for 10 years, and we've taken that region, a population of 6 million people, from 2 hours of power a day to 15 hours of power a day. And we've done it by switching use from diesel to natural gas, which is cheaper and it's much more environmentally friendly. So in the process, over the last 10 years, we've saved 42 million tons of carbon emissions, which is roughly equivalent to 2 million cars off the road in a year. We've put $25 billion cash in the hands of the government, which has really enabled the government to invest that money into the social sector. But I think that by itself is part of the solution. You also need to look at other areas. There was a reference to it this morning on agriculture production. So as Crescent Group, within the UAE, we are very focused on the animal feed, which is imported in the region, which actually causes a lot of emissions. And we are looking at hydroponic farming as a way of growing that, optimizing use of water, as well as increasing domestic production of animal feed. So one of a pilot is going live here in Abu Dhabi soon. Separately, we're also looking at electric mobility as a way of moving roughly 65,000 two-wheelers which deliver food and essential services from internal combustion engines to electric. So I think the answer is multi-pronged, and it'll have to be a solution specific to our country in dealing with that dilemma.
Roger, I think turning to you in the context that we've heard a lot of conversation, I think the headlines, going from 150 billion cubic meters of gas in Russia flows to Europe, to severing that obviously garner a lot of headlines. We saw the conversation between Minister Mazrui and Minister Al-Kabi this morning about the gas markets principally. But I think building on Minister Balluku's comments, there's obviously the other sectors, and I think the breadth and depth of GE's global portfolio provides kind of context on the power side and some of the clean energy technologies that are on the horizon. And it'd be really interesting to see reflectively, as we build a bridge now, for the path forward, how you think this past year set the groundwork on the maybe non-conventional, non-gas side of the equation.
Right, well, thank you. And as you mentioned, GE helps power 1/3 of the world's energy in 170 countries. And so we take very seriously as one of the leading innovators of technology to not only decarbonize the energy sector, but make sure we're electrifying it at the same time. To your point about the billion people in the world who lack access to affordable, reliable, sustainable electricity, that's where our passion lies. Not only decarbonizing, but making sure the kids can turn the lights on to do homework, and parents have access to healthcare, economic opportunities, and we're electrifying. And I think that really is the theme that emerged out of some of these events we're all talking about from 2022 leading into 2023. We're all fully committed to our decarbonization goals and the technology pathways to get there, the innovation pathways. But electrification is at the same time emerging to that same level that we have to do both of these things together. And your example of switching from diesel to natural gas, there's nothing I can say more concrete than that, the examples you gave about the opportunities to use conventional power, natural gas, but you asked about some of the other technologies. So of course we're seeing strong opportunities for renewable energy, both wind and solar, as well as investing in the breakthrough technologies of tomorrow, where we made some significant milestones last year on running hydrogen as a fuel and gas turbines. We had a demonstration project right at Sharm el-Sheikh during COP27, where we did some hydrogen blending into the Sharm el-Sheikh power plant, the first time for Egypt, the first time for the African continent. Optimism around carbon capture, sequestration, and small modular reactors getting very significant momentum and acceptance all around the world. So we're excited both about the progress we're making with natural gas and fuel switching, with the opportunities for renewables being bolstered by policies like the Inflation Reduction Act, which was part of the discussion this morning, and real proof points on the breakthrough technology. We know the breakthrough technologies are years away, if not, we're talking 2030s for some of them, but we want to be showing those proof points, and I think we had those opportunities. The other thing we'd say beyond the actual innovation and the power generation is the electrification side, that as we're decarbonizing, we want to be growing access to affordable, reliable, sustainable electricity. The invasion of Russia into Ukraine, as you said earlier, has really brought that to the forefront. We just can't take for granted being able to turn the lights on, whether it's weather events, whether it's energy security. And so the opportunities now to harden the grid, I think are front and center more than I've ever seen kind of in my career. So we look forward this year to continuing to grow that resiliency for the grid, bring on those technologies that not only will make electricity more reliable, affordable, and sustainable, but create that foundation for the decarbonization goals at the same time.
Well, so I want to key in on something you're talking about here, Roger, which I think, you preempted where I wanted to have this conversation go. The global energy agenda, one of the benefits we have is that we can look year to year and compare the perspectives and the perspectives of this broad coalition of stakeholders from the energy and climate world. And in 2021, on the throes of COVID, there was broad pessimism, and we were contracting in terms of expectations for the energy transition overall, expanded expectations for conventional energies, which it's great in terms of like it's good to know where people are at and where the world's headed. And you would think that Moscow and the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine would have perhaps compounded that pessimism. But in fact, as we've seen in conversations and the essays that were drafted in the Global Energy Agenda and the survey results that we experienced this year, frankly, there's broad scale, I think, optimism that it's growing in terms of the expectation for the energy transition. And certainly in Europe, there's even more resolve for that. Minister, I'd be really interested, as we know the framing, we know the challenges of the past year, but just thinking about how the energy transition in going forward is now going to have tailwinds of this experience and reinforcing the imperative of an energy transition, across the board.
I want to share with you a very interesting fact. According to the International Energy Agency, the world is set to add as much renewable power in the next 5 years as it did in the past 20 years. This is a very important fact. Of course, we had set in Europe our goals, our aim to be reached by 2030. Of course, we have invested in Europe very intensively regarding the renewable energy, and as I said, the diversification of sources is very important. But we should say that all the complexity that we have faced in 2022 have been kind of pushing us forward much faster to have the possibility of increasing the production from renewable sources and white note from new technologies as the hydrogen will be in the future. So today all the parks that are designed or are building in the region of Europe, all of them have let's say, the possibility to produce and to collect in the future the hydrogen from the PV parks. So all these are very important steps that, of course, have been designed and planned from long time, but due to this situation, we have fostered our strategies. But I still believe that we cannot rely only on renewable energy. So the green agenda, the transition on this green agenda, they are very important. But we should take into consideration that even the renewable energy can fail sometimes. Let's keep into consideration that during 2021, the production from the aeolic parks, the windmills of the North Sea, have been 50% less that the states have planned because of the wind. The wind was 50% less in speed. The renewable energy you can plan, but of course you never can get what you have planned. It's the same story that we have with hydro plants. The 2022 for Albania and for all of the region have been a very dry year. So what we have planned, what we have produced had a difference of 20%, which have translated in imports with very high prices. So we should create an energy mix. An energy mix, of course, based on renewable energy, based on new technology, based on new sources, as the hydrogen is, but of course should be a mixture, and we should have reliable sources as the LNG is. I'm talking, or Albania is talking through the experience as a country that have based everything on renewable energy. The mixture can offer for every country the energy security, which is the most important. Europe should replace about 2/3 of the Russian gas that have used during all this time in the near future, in the near 5 years. Of course, this will ask capital-intensive investment, and of course, this will ask innovative sources and technology in the future. During this year, just for the protection and for having new supply sources, Europe has spent around 800 billion of euros. Only Albania, which is a very small country with 3 million of citizens, we have spent about $500 million of euros just to provide energy to our country. So energy, it's expensive, energy, it's vital, and of course we should be innovative to protect our countries and to find a way how to protect all the globe.
We're spending a lot of time discussing the aspects of the supply side, and I think, in the hunt for market stability and providing the conditions for an accelerated energy transition that has the economic and political stability that enables the decisions, the hard decisions to be made to get to where we need to be over the long range. We also have the demand side. Stephen, you and I have spent some time thinking about and discussing the importance of demand, and I would just love to hear and build on some of your reflections. China, the zero COVID policy, what we're seeing in terms of demand and how that is influencing this concept of building a world that has market stability and what we need to be thinking about in that context of the demand side.
Yeah, Landon, we're distracted, I suppose, by a mid-20th century war with all of its explosions and casualties and just horrible reminders of the past. If that were not going on, the story of this past year would certainly have been 1.4 billion people and their economy putting themselves voluntarily in timeout and driving their demand down. I've thought about it. I can't really recall any comparable scenario in the past on that sort of scale where someone has turned down their demand and affected it. I guess we should be pleased of that for what it allowed Europe to do this year. Chinese demand was down 18%, I believe, of the additional 40 million tons of LNG that Europe brought in, probably 20% of that effectively came from Asia. So that was a very good thing that happened. That's what's led to these 85% storage levels now. It's given Europe the time and opportunity to build up flexible infrastructure to avoid the debottlenecking, as I said before. So at least it's given Europe a head start. That demand has to come back online. An economy of 1.4 billion doesn't stay on the sidelines forever. It will come back. It will lead to some competition that was not there before. It's to be seen how quickly that happens. And what will that do? As I said, I'm glad that Europe won't have the bottlenecks that they had before. I think it's going to be easier to get some of those volumes, particularly into the Baltic. But there's not going to be a lot of flexibility this year. There's not a lot of liquefaction capacity coming online. We heard the energy ministers correctly saying that's really something for late 24, 25, 26. And so that just means more competition. And as we know, because we operate in LATAM, we operate in South Asia, that's going to mean enhanced competition for those spot volumes. At the same time, we've seen Argentina, we've seen Brazil, we've seen other countries continue to access the spot volumes. I saw Ingro out here in the hall, who has the terminal where our vessel in Karachi. That vessel imported over 1% of global LNG this past year. And what's that mean? That means that those volumes happen to be on long-term affordable contracts. So I think you're going to see a rush on the demand side, though it's moving slowly, of people realizing that sometimes you have to achieve energy security through a contracting strategy as much as through an infrastructure strategy. So we'll see how it unfolds, but certainly that's going to be a demand driver this year, for sure.
Building on the theme of a broader outlook, because of course, yes, Russia, Ukraine had a tremendous impact, particularly regionally in Europe, and now we're talking about the context of global demand in China. I want to bring in a third component of this conversation, Neeraj, and in the pursuit of finding balance, I think, which is thematically something that we've talked about, that Crescent is thinking about in the global energy transition. Nowhere is any community more impacted by the energy crisis, by what's going on with climate, than the developing world. And I really want to bring in that perspective, given Crescent's leadership and thought leadership on that space. How do we provide not just market stability for the West or for major global economies, but for a much broader global community?
Well, I think there are two key elements to that which needs to be addressed. The first is that affordability. Affordability is a key element of this. Otherwise, people continue to use wood and coal for consumption. I mean, I won't name a country, but there is a neighboring country not far away where 70% of its energy is generated from coal, 20% from fossil fuels, and about 10% from renewables and nuclear. It's a large country with a very large population, and they will continue to use coal until you find the right balance in terms of price. I think the Minister Mazrui this morning talked about $4 or $5 not being the right price, but equally double-digit is not the right price too. But that price has to rise to a certain level under a long-term contract to give the governments a planning tool to be able to plan the economies and make the necessary investments to be able to receive natural gas on a long-term basis. We certainly see natural gas as a key component of the solution for developing markets. It takes them from where they are to the next level in the journey of carbon transition. I mean, we as Crescent have achieved over a period of time 85% production from natural gas, and we are 1/3 of global average in terms of industry. And last year we achieved carbon neutrality by supporting some wind farms. So we could do it as an upstream producer. There's really no reason why the emerging markets, developing economies can't follow that path, but it needs to make that commitment to a long-term strategy and building. I mean, energy you can't produce. It's not like a chocolate factory you can produce immediately. You need to make long-term investments, and these things take time, from FID to putting the infrastructure before it comes on stream. So I would say there would be these two important pitfalls. One is to continue to assume that the renewables will be your solution, I think it has to coexist with others in a broader energy mix. And secondly, making the decisions which are more longer term to be able to procure longer term supplies on a stable basis.
Roger, right before this panel, we had a conversation about finance, and I want to have a little fun here. And we know that we need to finance energy transition, but let's hold constant for finance. Let's assume that we have the finance. We've unlocked the challenge of making the money flows. In our pursuit of market stability and making sure that we achieve our long-term vision of an energy transition, a stable energy transition, money's not an issue anymore. We have an ecosystem problem. Yep. Build that out. I've heard you talk about the ecosystem problem. I'm really curious, and I think the audience, both here in person and globally, will really appreciate some thoughts on this too, because it's another facet of that stability platform.
I appreciate that, and thank, because this has been my wake-up call recently. Perhaps everyone in the audience who's more sophisticated than me already understands this, but it was a little bit of a revelation to me recently, because if we look at the Inflation Reduction Act, I would never say money is not an issue, but we're starting to unlock some of the money issues. The Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, put hundreds of billions of dollars towards financing a lot of the things we're talking about in the United States. And you have private capital, private markets saying, we're going to take every one of those dollars and multiply them. So money is still an issue. I would never say it's not, but it's perhaps we're starting to address that side of it. And then you step back, well, that's what we've always asked for, right? We have good policies, we have the money coming on board. That's what we've been asking for. But then when we step back from that, we kind of, there's like this other wake-up call, which is the ecosystem point. Let's say, hypothetically, to your point, if money was no longer an issue, we had all the money we need to spend. What could we do with that, and how quickly could we do it? And that's when all of a sudden, like, well, wait a second, we have an ecosystem issue. And I think the ecosystem issue presents itself in a few ways. One is kind of the regulatory side. Even though we're starting to see strong policies saying we want to drive the energy transition, we want to address decarbonization, our regulatory systems are gridlocked. Take in the United States, we have a huge issue with permitting and the years it takes and the uncertainty it takes. And once you decide you want to do a project, how many years you get hung up in kind of permitting review through a variety of different things. And there's just the resource issue too, all the kind of administration elements at different levels that have to approve these things and how backlogged they are. So we've got to fix kind of the regulatory administrative part of the ecosystem. Then we have a supply chain issue. I know supply chain's a big theme of this week, but are we ready? Do we have the factories in place? Do we have the materials in place? Do we have the labor in place? Are we doing enough to train? At GE, we love issues like that. Like, we want to solve for that. We want to do the training. We want to train people all around the world. But nonetheless, I think we would agree we're not there today to keep up with this pace. So we've got to think really strategically about that. And then we have the electrification issue, is even if we could solve for 1 and 2, how quickly can we get these resources onto a grid in a way that integrates with them to promote not only today's affordable reliability and sustainability, but also anticipates more extreme weather events, cybersecurity, the electrification of other sectors. So it's both a little bit intimidating and inspiring that we're dealing with. It's intimidating because it makes me realize if the United States were to kind of put everything in place today from a policy perspective, we still have to solve for the ecosystem. But it's also inspiring that we can have this conversation today, and there's such a united front among so many different diverse stakeholders who want to solve it. But I think, to be fair, thank you for the question, because we need to start bringing more attention to this ecosystem question now that some of the policies are starting to line up. We want to see more, but it's an increasing focus of our attention.
Well, you know, this morning when Dr. Sultan was here, he had a conversation about benchmarks. I recognize this is a COP28 year, so kind of thinking as we advance into 2023, Minister Balluku, you just came from IRENA. You know that they're the champions of the global stocktake this year. Dr. Sultan was as forward-leaning as saying, we already know the outcome. We know where we're at. We know the baseline. So we need to start engaging in all of the components that we just covered in the past conversation. And so Roger, I appreciate you talking about this other, I think, aspect of the energy transition that maybe we're not discussing. But Minister Balluku, I just want to shift the conversation to one of opportunity, because in terms of tone, that's where the energy agenda went this year. When we talk to the broader community out there and we see the surveys and we see the essays, there's a lot of momentum and optimism for the action that can result from COP28, from a year of pragmatic cross-sectoral engagement. And would just really welcome your thoughts in terms of, what's the benchmarks for success? What are you hoping to get out of what could turn out to be a really dynamic year?
Well, I will start again from what previously have been said. It's not only about the energy. The challenges are very complex and different right now. It's about the labor. Mm-hmm. It's about the cybersecurity matters, which are part of every sector right now. So we are facing this challenge of cybersecurity, starting from the energy sector to different other sectors as aviation, so in critical sectors, transportation and everywhere. So the future seems to be very challenging. But of course, having a clear plan, and I should say that by now it seems that both governments and the private sector now have a clear path to be followed on this new situation created worldwide. And this is very important. I want to give a very important example. During 2023, we had in Albania an initiative of the private sector regarding the investment on renewable energy that is equivalent of 1.7 gigawatt of PV parks, aeolic parks, which is equivalent of 1.1 billion of euros investment. So what is key to success, in my point of view, it's a collaboration, a synergy between governments and private sector. This should be the key to the success. And what is very important is to build sustainable strategies. It costs so much to change strategies every time. So we start with a strategy, let's say for decarbonization, and then we shift. It's a very, very funny argument in Europe right now. We have fight, and Germany have changed all the system of producing energy regarding the nuclears. And now the nuclear is quoted as renewable energy for Europe. So this is how you change and how you shift during the path, but it's costly. And many times it's confusing the policies of governments, and it's confusing people. So what is very important to design strategies that can stand for a long time. It's very important to be all in the same page. It's very important to have a synergy between governments and private sector. This will be the success in my point of view.
Well, the expectation of the private sector is pretty big this year. I think having Dr. Sultan both have his leadership across industry and be an actual CEO in charge of this process is going to bring a new element to the dialogue. In addition, as his role as minister, that expectation, Stephen, is cross-sectoral, right? They're bringing in energy majors, they're bringing in finance, they're bringing in tech. As you look at the year ahead, and we start rebuilding towards a stronger energy system, what should the goals for industry be? Where should we land in 2023, I think, with an eye even further forward?
Well, it's part of a trajectory, obviously, but there's a reason why we've said energy security. I haven't had a clicker, but it's been a bunch today. There's a definite reason for that, and it matters in so many different ways. Because we have FSRUs in emerging markets, because we have FSRUs in Europe, we see the impact of energy security all over the world. We see its impact on food security. We see in some countries when we show up for the first time and urea plants that have been idled come back online, the local farmers start having fertilizer again, or the local steel plant can go back online and start employing people again. We've seen markets where they had many coal projects planned and they canceled them once they started getting LNG. We need to keep, and to the Deputy Prime Minister's point, there are other sorts of intermittency going back again to October and November of 2021. And the wind droughts. I'd never heard the phrase wind drought outside an America Cups race in terms of which sailboat was going to win, and then suddenly, it's on the television all the time, and it's a real thing. We have to have the flexible import infrastructure that's going to allow both OECD countries that have to have that energy security and are going to allow the emerging markets to produce that urea, to have that locally produced steel, and to continue to shutter coal plants. We cannot have the global south reverting to coal. And from our standpoint, we're just going to accelerate the use of flexible infrastructure to get that done.
As I watch the time here tick down, Neeraj, Roger, I'm going to turn to you for the same question. You know, at the end of this year, as we look at keeping 1.5 degrees alive and 2030 benchmarks, mid-century goals, you know, what is the benchmark for success of both COP28, but the overall broad year of 2023 in general?
So I'll say something more specific as a benchmark for success. You know, in my view, there is a need for more capital, private sector capital, to become available to meet needs of emerging markets and developing markets. As you heard earlier on today, that capital is available for US, OECD countries, but it's not available for projects outside that world. So the partnership between the multilaterals is important. I think that leadership needs to re-emerge back, which has been shy over the last couple of years. And really, people have been frightened into supporting hydrocarbon projects because it's something to do with energy, because they need to be seen as supporting renewable projects. I think that paradigm needs to shift. And this COP28 can achieve that, because you heard two ministers today, you know, talking openly about it, and particularly Minister Kabi was bold enough to say that you need the capital. I mean, look at the numbers. You need $5 trillion a year to achieve that, right? Where are you going to get that money from until you get the multilaterals who've completely switched off funding to change their mindset? And UAE assuming leadership at the World Bank Group is a very positive development. So I'm hoping one measure of success would be if they've been able to move the needle with the multilaterals to make finance available for hydrocarbon projects.
Roger?
I spoke earlier about the technology, how the pace of technology being delivered and implemented is increasing, renewable energy, natural gas, and the breakthrough technologies. We talked about the ecosystem. The last thing I would add to this is I think what has been the most transformative part of the last few years, which doesn't get talked about a lot, is the odd bedfellows type partnerships that are increasingly having a factor. The increasing role of companies in being the drivers of technology to deliver on decarbonization and electrification, with the support, with the partnership of governments, whether the UAE or other countries or multinational organizations, with NGOs, with other stakeholders, with different companies coming together. We saw a lot of that at COP27. I think Egypt did a masterful job bringing together a diverse set of stakeholders to solve a problem. And I would really urge the UAE, which I'm already seeing a lot of optimism here, to continue to do that, because no one entity can solve this on their own. It's really going to take a diversity of views, a diversity of perspectives. So the more we can spend the time now on these types of partnerships to come together, I think the more successful we're going to be at the end of the year to kind of aim for some of the goals that you've been putting on the table.
All right, Deputy Prime Minister Balluku, any closing thoughts on this? Did we get our benchmarks right?
Yeah, I took notes. I think that the synergy between government and the private sector is very important. Steve said that the flexible infrastructure. So we have all our points. I believe that through experience, we will be in stronger position in the future, of course.
Thank you. Well, please join me in welcoming and thanking this panel.